Hi, everyone. Welcome back to dinanddaf. This is Elana Stein Hain. And this week we are talking about the question of, are you at a disadvantage if you're honest? And the reason why we're bringing this up is A, because we're always taught cheaters never prosper, but B, because this week in the daf, we have an example on Kuf Nun Dalet Amud Aleph of Bava Batra, 154a, that asks the question, what if we have a situation where we have a shtar, we have a contract, and it is not mekuyam? The witnesses on the contract have not been re-verified. So you just have this contract with witnesses' signatures on them, but they haven't been re-verified since the contract has been written to make sure they weren't fake. The people who wrote them really were able to be witnesses on this thing. And then the party who owes the money according to the contract says, all right, I admit that this is a good contract, but I already paid it. So here we have a situation where the person who stands to lose money from the contract admitted this contract is real, told the truth, but then said, but I don't have to pay it because I already did. So do we say this person who told the truth is at an advantage now? And just like they said the contract is good, they also said the contract has been paid already, and we believe them on both. Or do we say, sorry, Buster, glad that you told the truth, but once you say that it's a contract and it's good, it's good. And we actually can't necessarily believe you that you already repaid it. Right? So interesting question. The way that it's described in the Gemara is Moda Bishtar Shekhtavo, one who admits that they wrote a shtar, that they wrote a contract. Do they have to, tzarich l'kaimo? Does the other party have to do kiyum shtarot? Meaning, do we essentially say that unless the other party now does kiyum shtarot to verify the witnesses on the shtar, we assume that everything we heard from the party that admitted is completely true. Namely, the shtar has been repaid. Okay? So let's take a look. I think it's interesting to consider in this situation, what are the variables that would lead you to say, to answer one way or another? What are the variables that would lead you to say, sorry, Charlie, you told the truth, but we still don't believe you that you repaid. We only believe you that the shtar is active. And now that it's an active shtar and a validated shtar, you have to pay. Versus saying, the fact that you told us the truth, now we believe you on all of what you said, right? So it turns out that when you look at the different Rishonim, it seems to be that there are three variables at play here. One variable is the question of, well, how solid do we think the claim of the creditor? This is a valid shtar, but I already paid it. How solid do we think that claim is? That's one variable that people talk about as determining whether we say now the guy who admitted it or the gal who admitted it, the person who admitted it, is off the hook versus saying, no, they're still on the hook. That's one variable. A second variable that comes up is actually, it's not about the question of how much we believe what the Moda Bishtar Shekhtavo said. It's actually a matter of what is the status of a shtar that hasn't had kiyum shtarot. Do we look at a shtar that has witnesses signed on it, but we haven't brought those witnesses in now to say, hey, is this really your signature? Hey, were you old enough? Hey, are you related to each other? Do we look at that shtar as, oh, that's a good shtar? Or do we say, when you see a piece of paper with signatures on it, it's essentially like it's like finding a piece of trash. Only once you bring in the witnesses, or you bring people who can give testimony about the witnesses who are written on the shtar, then it really turns into a contract. But otherwise, it's just a piece of paper, right? That's a second variable. And the third variable is wait. This is not about how much do you believe me when I say it's a real shtar, but I paid it. And it's not about what do we think of this contract that has witnesses' signatures on them, but there's been no kiyum shtarot. I mean, we haven't brought witnesses in and said, tell us that you were old enough, tell us that you saw this, tell us that you weren't related to each other, or we bring some other witnesses in who say, yeah, we really saw those witnesses were legitimate and this is really their signature. Actually, it might be a third issue. Third issue might be, oh, wait a second. If you and I have a contract together and I say I paid that contract already, why do you still have it? A little strange, right? Don't you think if I repaid the money that I owe based on this contract, I would have insisted that we like tear up this contract? Or maybe I get to hold the contract or we put it in escrow somewhere. But you certainly, as the creditor of this situation, shouldn't still have it, right? So three different dimensions of the really the scenario that we have here, right? You have a person making an admission, and we want to know how solid that admission is. We have an item, namely the contract, and we want to understand what its status is when it can only speak for itself, essentially. And then you have another party who is holding the item, and meaning the placement of that item may indicate something about whether it's been repaid or not, right? So this is kind of, I like being able to see all three of these different dimensions of the situation. So let's look at some of the sources and just gain an appreciation for this, okay? First things first, we have a number of other places in Shas where this discussion of mודה בשטר שכתבו צריך לקיימו או אינו צריך לקיימו, right? Or אין צריך לקיימו. We have that come up a few times in Shas, and I want to look at one other example of where it comes up. And that example is in Bava Batra. You also, by the way, you have it in Ketubot on Daf Yud Tet Amud Aleph. But the example that I want to look at is I want to look at Bava Batra, Daf Zayin, because I just think it's an interesting scenario. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. Share. Here we go. Okay. I'm going to go to presentation version. Okay. So first we have our Gemara in Bava Batra. The Mishnah had said, I mean, we've been talking so much of the time in this parak about a shchiv meira, right? Someone who's on their deathbed and gave something away on their deathbed. And apparently this Mishnah brings up a situation where somebody is claiming they were a shchiv meira when they gave something away, but there actually was nothing written in the document that said that they were a shchiv meira. And so what you have is you have people arguing back and forth. Was this person a shchiv meira? Was this not the person not a shchiv meira? And there's a machloket between Rabbi Meir and the Chachamim. Who do we believe? And the Gemara Bava Batra essentially continues and says, actually, let us tell you what the case is. The case is where the shtar has not had any validation, that the witnesses on it were kosher, knew each other, weren't related to each other, were old enough, et cetera, that this is their signature even. And what happens is the person who was supposed to, the fact that one party even says, I was a party to this shtar, but also wants to be to'en, but it's not something that I should have to pay now, right? Because I was a shchiv meira, and that's the only reason why I meant to give it away. Do we believe them or don't we believe them, right? So that was our example. But when you look in Bava Batra, Daf Zayin Amud Aleph, It's not a case of a shliv meira giving something or a person giving something. It's the more classic case of moda b'shtar sheketavo tzarich l'kaimo or ein tzarich l'kaimo, which is a halva, a loan. Okay, and what we're usually talking about here is it's the borrower who would be admitting, "Hey, I was a party to this shtar." So here we go in Bava Batra Zayin Amud Aleph. Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Shnaim adukin b'shtar. Two people, a creditor and a debtor, are holding a shtar. Malva omer, and the creditor says, Shalihu, it's mine. V'nafal mimeni u'mitzativ, and it fell out of my hands, and I found it. The lova amar, and the debtor says, Shelchahu ufrativ lecha. The debtor says, yes, it is yours, right? Admits that it's a real shtar, but I paid you back, right? Yitkayem hashtar b'chotamav, divrei Rebbe. Rebbe says, okay, do kiyum shtarot, right? If the malveh, if the creditor can do kiyum shtarot and prove that this is a legitimate shtar, then we will not believe the loveh who said, I paid you back. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel omer yachloku. Shimon ben Gamliel disagrees. He says, no, they should split the amount. And then there's another opinion, but I'm ignoring the next opinion for a minute. Amar Rava, Amar Nachman. Rava says in the name of Nachman, B'mekuyam divrei hakol yachloku. Everybody agrees that if this shtar has been validated, meaning we know that the edim on the shtar are legitimate, they're going to split the amount. Okay? But v'i lo mekuyam le, lo palik. Excuse me, sorry. Ki pligi b'she'enu mekuyam. When do they argue? If it hasn't been validated. Rebbe Savar, Rebbe who says that actually you need to do kiyum shtarot, otherwise the lova doesn't have to pay. He thinks moda b'shtar sheketavo, if the party that stands to lose admits, I was part of writing this contract, tzarich l'kaimo, the other side has to do kiyum shtarot in order to collect. V'i mekayim le polig, and if they can do kiyum shtarot, then we'll half it because we don't know what's real. V'i lo mekayim lo polig. And if they can't do kiyum shtar, we are not going to half it, right? Essentially, the lova is going to have to pay nothing. My time, why? Because without the fact that the lova was willing to admit, hey, I was part of this shtar, it's just like a piece of cheres. It's like a piece of shard of pottery. It's nothing. Man kamashvi lilahai shtara. Who made this thing into a shtar? The lova. The lova did by admitting, because there was no kiyum shtar. Without kiyum shtar, it's like a nothing burger. But the lova, who was the one who said it's real, Hakamar Depriel, he said it's also been repaid, right? So that's Rebbe's opinion. And that's why, if they're both holding it at once, he thinks if the lova is the only one giving us information that this is valid, and you haven't done proper kiyum shtarot, then the lova shouldn't have to give anything. On the other hand, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, who thought yachloku, split it. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel savar moda b'shtar sheketavo ein tzarich l'kaimo. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel disagrees. He says, look, telling the truth doesn't always get you what you want. If somebody who stands to lose from a shtar is the one admitting that it is a valid shtar, but says, I repaid, the other side doesn't have to do kiyum shtar. They can say, I'm sorry, you admitted that this is a valid shtar. You have no proof that you paid me, so pay me. V'avagav, the low mekayim, and even if the other party doesn't do kiyum shtar, they should split. Why are they splitting? Because they're both holding it. That's why they should split, right? So here's another type of case of moda b'shtar, not a case where I was giving a gift and I didn't write that I was a shliv meira in giving the gift, and I got healthier, and now I want to renege, and there's no kiyum shtar, and I say, I admit that I wrote it, but I was a shliv meira, so I shouldn't have to let you keep that because it was only because I was dying, chas v'sholom, right? That's one version of moda b'shtar. Here, another version of moda b'shtar, the lova is saying, I admit that I was party to this contract, but I paid it, and now I stand to lose by being honest. Do we say, sorry, once you've said that this is a good shtar, we don't believe you about the fact that it's not, that you paid it? Or do we say, well, you're the only one telling us that it's a good shtar, so if you're telling us that, we also believe the other side of what you say, right? So those are two of our examples, right? So as I mentioned before, the logic of whether you would say, once that person who stands to lose admits that there's a shtar and that it's valid, the other side benefits, or the logic of because that person admitted that it was a good shtar, the other side does not benefit, and it's the person who admitted who should benefit, revolve around one of three issues. Okay. So the Gemara, the Tosfot in the Gemara in Ketubot Daf Yotet actually lays out all three issues, trying to explain why is it that we would ever say that somebody who's honest about the shtar is going to lose out now because of it. Why don't we just believe them? Just like they said, I was party to it, even though they didn't have to. You should believe them when they said it's parua, they paid it, right? So let's see. So the Tosfot asked, V'im Tomar, and if you say, well, my time alone meheman b'migo to ibayam or mezuyaf. Why aren't we believing this love, right? Given that she could have said it's a totally false shtar, right? Nobody forced the lova to admit I was a party to this shtar. She could have had a migo, meaning a much better argument, and said, this is a totally invalid shtar. Right? Why are we saying that she's going to lose by being honest? The fact that she chose to be honest, she should be, right? So one reason given by Tosfot, v'yesh lomar, some say, Deshema yare lo velomar mezuyaf, pen yakchishuhu velek amigo. One answer is, no, sorry, the lova doesn't have amigo. The lova couldn't have ever said, this is a fake document. She'd be too scared that Aiden would come by and deny what she said. So there's no amigo here, right? Meaning, why is it that when you come forth and you say, I was party to this shtar, but I already paid it? Why do we say, sorry, you lose? Because you didn't have a better claim to make. You didn't have it's not like you had a better claim to make and you could have made it and here you were admitted. You had no recourse. And so we just don't believe what you say, really, right? Like we just don't believe the second half of what you say. Once you tell us it's in bounds as a valid shtar, tough luck. That's what it is. That's one answer. So it revolves around how much we believe what the lova said. Okay. Second variable. Upirish hakuntras b'makom acher. Rashi explains elsewhere. No, I'll tell you the reason why the lova is going to lose now. Because ditama mishum, the reason is because it's bar Torah ein sarach kiyum. Really, min haTorah, you don't require kiyum shtar in general. You don't need to validate the witnesses that are on the shtar after the fact. Because signatures on a shtar, we consider those ironclad, right? The assumption is when they signed, there was some sense of making sure that they were the right people. They were allowed to sign. They were there, right? We assume that signatures on a document, it's as though they have been examined in Beitin. And it's only for a banan kiyum. And it's only midirabanan that you have to do kiyum shtar. And by the way, it's only kitain mezuyafu. It's only if one side says this is a fake document. Only if you say this is a fake document, meaning it's forged or whatever it is, then rabbanan require kiyum shtar. But if there is no such argument, it's a fake document. If nobody's arguing that, then when we look at this document, as soon as the lova is not saying this is fake, but is admitting that it's real, we look at it and we say, well, this document has huge legal standing. It has witnesses' signatures on it. It has legal standing. We're not going to erase that. And it's for that reason, I'm sorry, lova, you lose out. Because when we look at a document that has signatures on it, if there's nobody's being our heir, if there's nobody saying this is a fake document, then we believe what it says and we have to collect on that basis. Second variable that we mentioned before. Third variable, and this is interesting, Tosfot bring it up only to reject it, but there are other Rishonim who bring it up and keep it. I brought the Tosfot version because I think it's kind of wonderful to see in Tosfot themselves the three different possible variables here. You shouldn't say that we don't believe the love because she could have had a better claim. Lomar paruahu, meaning we don't believe her to say it's been repaid. Why? Di'i pare, because if she had repaid it, shtar biyade my bay, why does the malva have the shtar in the first place still? Right? So Tosfot would say that's another reason people might give to why the lova admitting this shtar is good, but then saying I repaid it, we look at them and say, sorry, like if you repaid it, why is it still in the hands of the malva? Now Tosfot would say, I don't want you to think that way. I don't think that's a good logic. Why? Because there's another example in the Gemara where the lova says not I repaid it, but the lova says actually this shtar was just written for my credibility to make it look like people would be willing to lend me money. And there, the logic of, well, why is the malva holding it doesn't work, right? Meaning, of course, the malva's holding it's a fake. It's not for anything real. It's not for a real halva. So Tosfot rejected. But suffice it to say, this is the third variable. The third variable is what is it doing in the hands of the malva? And of course, all of these we're trying to explain to us, why do we say when the lovet or whoever the party is who stands to lose money is the only one who says this is a good shtar, even though there's been no kiyum shtar, but then says, but I shouldn't have to pay it because in the case of the lovet, I am, I already paid. Or in the case of the shliv merat, because I was a shliv merat, and it was only because I thought I was dying, right? Whatever the case may be, this is trying to explain why we would say, sorry, you're going to have to pay. Either because we don't think you have amigo, because you never would have made the better claim, which is that it's actually fake or forged, or because a shtar, once you admit that it's the real deal, you're now looking at, being a love, making some sort of claim, I paid it, and trying to use that to overcome a signed document by witnesses that says you owe something. And you can't override those witnesses. It's sitting right there, right? The idea of a shtar that has witnesses on it, it's not just a piece of paper. It's legitimate, even if we haven't done official kiyum shtarot. The fact that you haven't said it's fake means it's legitimate and you can't override it. Or the third, why is it that it's in the hands of the malveh, of the collector, if really you already paid, right? And it's interesting to see the other side of the coin, which seems to be how people paskin, the other side of the coin of what we would say sarich lekaimo, which is the person who stands to lose money, who admits this shtar is good, but I paid, or I was a shliv meirah, or whatever the case may be, right? We actually do believe them, and we actually do allow them not to pay. The Rishonim who explain that, they also explain it each on the basis of one of these three variables. The variable of how much do we believe what you say, variable of what do we think of a piece of paper shtar that hasn't had official kiyum shtarot, hasn't been officially validated, and three, how much credence do we give to the fact that it is in the hands of the person to whom you owe something, right? So let's just see that for a moment. So the Rambam, for example, saying, Otzi alav shtar chov, she'enu yachol kaimo, if a malva says, here, you owe me, right? You owe me based on this contract, but it's a contract that I can't validate. V'amar halove, and the borrower says, emet shani katavti shtar zeh. It's true, I did write this shtar. Haval prativ, but I already paid. Oh, amanahu, or this shtar was just for the purpose of making me look credible. It wasn't a real halva. It was just to make people know that you would, in theory, lend money to me. It makes me look good. Oh, katavti lilvot v'adayin lo laviti. Or I actually wrote that I was going to borrow from you, but I haven't. or anything like that. Oh, il v'im ratzah, because the love could have, Amar could have said, Lo heud dvarim me'olam, I don't know what you're talking about. None of this ever happened. V'harei mipiv nitkayim, and it was upheld by the mouth of the love. Harei ze ne'eman, we believe the love on the other side, the other part of their claim, right? And Rambam adds, v'shava heset v'pater. But the love does have to take a shvua and then is pater from paying, right? And then he says, and if somehow the malva was able to do kiyum shtar in beitin afterwards, then hareu kishtar shtar. Then it's treated like a regular shtar. But the point is, he's got a migo, right? We believe him because he could have said a claim that would have benefited him. Now, Tosfot clearly didn't think that, right? That he would have ever said that claim. Rambam does think perhaps the Lova would have made a better claim and said, I don't know what you're talking about. None of this ever happened. And therefore, we believe them both that it exists and it's a real shtar and that they already paid it. Or maybe they never made the deal in the first place. Or maybe it was a shtar amana. Maybe it was just for credibility's sake, right? So that's the piece of how much do we believe them. A different explanation for this comes from the Rashba. The Rashba says, actually, this all has to do with what we think of a shtar that hasn't had kiyum shtaru. The Rashba says, Diman kamashvile shtarahai. Who made this thing into a shtar? Haka amar depriyahu. Who? The person who said it's also been repaid. Meaning, when I look at a shtar that didn't have a kiyum shtaru, to me, it looks like a shard, like the Gemara in Bava Batra said. It looks like a shard of nothing. It's only because this lova was willing to admit that it's something. And the admission that it's something came with, and I already paid it. So really, this is about the question of what the status is of a shtar she'eno mekuyam, right? A shtar that has not had kiyum shtar. And then for our third variable, what is it doing in the hands of the person to whom money is owed if the money's already been repaid? So Tosfot say quite simply, sometimes it's possible that the malveh might pay for the shtar and therefore has the shtar in their possession and didn't give it back, right? Mishum dezimnin say Tosfot, apshite de safra zirle, dal halove litain schar ktivat shtar. Sometimes maybe it's just given to whoever paid for it. And even though the creditor should be the one who pays for the shtar, right? Sometimes if the lova doesn't have money, the malva gives for them. So bottom line, maybe it's just the malva had it and didn't give it back. Whatever the case may be, we could think of a scenario where the malva might not have given it back. So first, what I hope this does is it gives us a little bit of like almost like if you're looking at a transaction and you ask yourself, circle all the components to this transaction, things you can see and things you can't see, right? So we have the words of the person who owes money. We have the item, the shtar itself, and we have the placement of the item, the shtar being in the hands of. Now, to me, this is stuff that comes up in lots of transactions and lots of discussion of litigation, right? Believability, the question of likelihood based on circumstances, right? And the question of legal status, irrespective of the two parties. I also want to give a shout out, Rav Shmuel Shimoni, whose wife is Rabbanit Yael Shimoni from Drisha. I love his shiurim his written shiurim on VBM Torah. And I did look at his shiur on this topic, and it really helped me be able to divide this issue into these three different components. So thanks to Rav Shimoni, who I've never met, but have learned from quite a bit of late. Thanks, everyone. Looking forward to learning with you next time.